G'day folks, my name is Rob, welcome back to another F1 Fantasy video. Today we're looking at Daniel Ricciardo. As many of you know, he's recently rejoined F1 in place of Nick De Vries at AlphaTauri, so we're going to take a look at what the rest of the season means for him, what he looks like from a fantasy asset, and whether or not he's worth getting into your teams. As always, if you're enjoying the content, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really means a lot to me and to the channel now and moving forward. So let's get straight into it. Ricciardo, as just about, I assume everyone watching this video knows, was snapped up after impressing Christian Horner and the rest of the Red Bull organization in the simulator at Silverstone. The performances would have put him P2 on the grid as a result of qualifying, so I think that just really reaffirmed Red Bull's desire to get Nick De Vries out after a few pretty inconsistent performances throughout the season so far. Ricciardo comes into a car which hasn't really looked all that great. It's been pretty much a dog of a car. Sonoda's done well to lift it into the points a few times, but Nick De Vries wasn't really able to do anything like that. So I think Ricciardo's going to have his work cut out for him, not only coming into a team and a car where it's just so far back on the grid that will take a miracle to make some serious progress up the field, but also coming up against a teammate like Sonoda, who in the last kind of half a season or so has really impressed and built on those inconsistencies and errors and such that have plagued kind of his performances over the last couple of years. So I think Ricciardo's got obviously a very high benchmark to compete against. I definitely think he'll do well, but I guess he's only got half a season or so to prove himself to the Red Bull folks if he's worthy of a seat in their team next year. Perez, obviously well documented, he's struggled in the last few races, so obviously that added motivation to make progress and get into a competitive car next season, I'm sure, is front and center of Daniel's mind. As far as kind of what he means for fantasy, 4.5 million is what De Vries is currently priced at. He's still in the game. We haven't seen Ricciardo added yet, but I definitely expect we'll see that change come through in the next few days, certainly before the race. And how, I guess, drivers have been priced in the past through F1 when they've swapped seats or had to deputise in place of another driver because of an absence, they've been assigned the, I guess, incumbent driver's price at that point in time. Examples for me are Magnussen coming in for Nikita Mazepin before the first race of last season. Mazepin was priced at 5.5. Magnussen was assigned that starting price. Felipe Drugovich, he was going to deputise in favour of Lance Stroll with those broken wrists ahead of Bahrain this season. Obviously that didn't eventuate, but he was priced at 7.5 in the game, which was what Lance's starting price was too. And then last year, when De Vries actually did take the Williams seat in favour of Albon when he missed that race, I think it was at Monza, he just was assigned Albon's price for that race too. So I have every expectation, if that's the basis to go off, that Ricciardo will be given 4.5 million as his starting price. Whether or not I think that's fair, probably up for discussion. I personally think he's probably or should be priced closer to about 5.5 million, only because Sonoda's, I think, 5.1, if my memory serves me correctly. And we know what Daniel's capable of when he's in a really competitive car. Obviously had a pretty disappointing end to his McLaren days last season, but you know, we know what the kind of driver he is, his caliber, what he brings to the table, and I certainly think that's basis for at least a price that should be around 5.5. I don't think that F1 will change his price before Hungary. That may well be the case, but I'd be surprised if they do, only because De Vries is already owned by, at the moment, upwards of 20% of players in the game. He was owned at, I think, somewhere around 10 to 15% a week ago, so there's obviously an influx of new owners as a result of Ricciardo's announcement. I would definitely expect his price will change after the race at Hungary, unless, of course, he DNFs, but we just don't know the logic behind how F1 determines these price changes. Obviously, the recent performance of the race prior has some say in that, but to how much, I can't say with any certainty. And I definitely expect Ricciardo to be a favourite for driver of the day at Hungary, only because of that nostalgia that a lot of the fans certainly are influenced by. We saw this last season in Abu Dhabi, the last race of the season for everyone, obviously, but Seb's last race on the grid. He finished P10 in his last race with Aston Martin. Obviously not an amazing result, but still enough to encourage a lot of fans to vote him for driver of the day in his last race in F1. So I very much expect Ricciardo could be in that box seat for Hungary if he at least manages to make it across the finish line. But yeah, I think that's certainly a likelihood. And if that's 10 extra points in your pocket as a driver priced at hypothetically $4.5 million, that's money and points I'll take straight to the bank. So definitely worth considering if he's not already on your radar. As far as how he did last season, 49 points across the 22 race season. Solid, not spectacular. He had a few DNS littered in between as well, which didn't help. And that came out at around 2.2 points per race. Certainly not an impressive average for a driver of his standing. Obviously, the McLaren, it was well documented, he had struggles with that and just wasn't really able to replicate some of the performances we saw from him at Renault and at Red Bull in years prior. So 2.2, not great, and obviously wasn't helped being in that McLaren, which wasn't overly competitive last season, to gain positions and make overtakes, as you can see up above on the screen here, up here. F1FantasyTools.com has simulated the points, the overtakes positions gained had that occurred in last season's game. So based on that, you can see here on the screen, can't even get my arrows right, 0.4 positions gained per race and 1.6 overtakes per race. I definitely think he's able to build on that, hopefully even better those results this season. We'll just have to wait and see, but Tsunoda's been able to do that quite well so far, so I have every expectation Danny should be able to make something of that too, despite the car not looking overly great at the moment. So yeah, I think if he does come in at 4.5, definitely worth owning. Driver of the day consideration has to be kind of top of your list when it comes to deliberating whether or not he belongs in your team. And there's already been, as I mentioned before, quite a number of new owners as a result of that news. So I don't think I'll personally be making a decision on him until we get to the practice times. But you know, even if he is kind of averaging around kind of P15 or thereabouts, that's probably going to be enough for me to want to bring him into my team in favor of Joe, who I've had for about 3 races now, getting a little bit kind of bored of having the same team. But I think as far as the rest of the team makeup will be concerned, we've seen a lot from the McLarens and such lately, and I'll cover that in my team selection video coming out later this week, so stay tuned for that. Also, so if you guys have any thoughts on whether or not Ricciardo deserves to be in your team, if he should be up for consideration, let me know in the comments below if you think his price is going to come in at 4.5 or what you think he's should be fairly valued at. Also, would love to know, because there's going to be plenty of deliberation over that. But as always, guys, really appreciate you dropping by, and I'll see you all very soon.